Hello, everybody, and welcome to Oregon State University's Permaculture Design Pro class. We are the Winter-Spring 2024 class, and this is our seventh office hour. That means we only have three left. Also, just to make sure everybody's clear, all assignments, including resubmissions, are due on the final due date. And for this class, that's June 3rd at 9 a.m. So again, all assignments are due June 3rd at 9 a.m. There is no extension. And if you're wanting to resubmit previous assignments that you haven't gone back to, has to be done at that point. That also means that if you submit on time your final assignment and there's marks to be reworked or regraded, you can also resubmit in that final week. Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to take note of here before we began. Great questions this week. Really looking forward to them. Hello, Sky. Nice to have you here. Nice to get that. Let me just make sure I'm putting this on the right page here. Back to here. There we go. So a couple announcements this week starting off. We've got a number of great courses coming up in the next 3 to 6 months. Next month on May 9th, we've got a great webinar, free webinar done with Mark Krawczyk of Keyline, Vermont. He's going to be doing a deep dive into coppice agroforestry. Coppice agroforestry is a cut and come again forestry approach that was predominant until we got to dimensional lumber about 100, 150 years ago. He's going to go deep into that conversation. It's going to be about a 45-minute presentation. There's also going to be an opportunity to win a couple of spots in the coppice agroforestry course there for free. So if folks are keen on that, definitely check out and register for the webinar. Second, we've just confirmed that we're going to be doing a fall course. So I think she starts in November. Art and Science of Cultivating Living Soils with Joe Tobias. Joe was an apprentice to Elaine Ingham, and she's kind of gone beyond what Elaine taught and has really rounded out her skills and process. We ran this course first in 2019 and 2020. It's actually what started regenerative living, and really excited because Joe's updated a ton. If you're looking for a course on how to compost well, this will be a portion of that course, plus understanding all the different microorganisms in the soil, how they interact with each other, and what you can do to increase their populations. So great course if you're looking to get into the living soil food web and don't want to pay a couple $1,000s like Elaine's courses cost. And then finally, I'm offering a course that's going to be a first step into values-based decision making. For those that don't know, values-based decision making is a process that I curated out of Alan Savory's Holistic Management about a decade ago, and it was about how to any project, be it a land-based project or a human-based project, you can start to think about what are the values you want to be true about that project, and then use the values to filter out your decisions and your actions to get there. It's one of the things that I credit with the success that I've been able to have in both land design and my clients have been able to have, is that it's a self-guided approach, because we're focusing on, okay, well, I want to have a farm, but what's actually behind the farm? Well, I want to know where my food comes from. I want clean air and clean water. I want to be close to nature. There's a lot of things that can bring you that output, can bring you that value that isn't a farm. And for anybody who's tried farming, you'll know that it's a lot of work. So this is just a great way, great simple course. It's going to be a very simple course, a short stop for us to get into that idea of values-based decision making. A couple of follow-ups from last office hours. So this is a great book for those that are working in Spanish and English. This is a book that compares the different ecology, agriculture, and building terms that you're not going to find in your normal Spanish English dictionary. So I passed that on to Nathan and I found the link. Also, I connected Channa with another person who had reached out, and Channa had a really nice thing to say. He said, "Hey, Javan, this is to express my sincere gratitude for your exceptional support during the regarding the human-elephant conflict I'm facing on my farm in Sri Lanka. I know this is a specific issue, likely not relevant to most students, yet you went above and beyond to help. Your willingness to research the topic and even connect me with industry experts demonstrates a remarkable dedication to your students. It's clear that your passion for teaching extends far beyond the curriculum. Your efforts directly contribute to finding solutions for real-world environmental challenges." So I'm reading this not not with some kind of self-panagerizing behavior, but to point out that it doesn't take a lot for us to reach out to connect and really share what we know. Each one of us becomes our own hub and our own ecology around us. And it's incredible the amount of education that we can garner, an incredible amount of information we can garner and share. So thank you very much, Channa. But at the same time, I just want everyone to realize that we all become these little hubs. And hopefully you've started to see that within this course, because we all have something to teach. We all have something to share. I've learned a ton from the students in this course in particular. So thank you, Channa, and thanks to everybody. So I think I saw Ruben on here. Yes, I did. Okay, so Ruben, as I read his question earlier, he said he was going to be late, but we can just move on forward. So, hey, Javan, I'm still trying to grapple with the use of trees on my site. Seems clear that I need to add organic matter. The soils are very freely draining. So what little rainfall there is not held in the soil very well. I think pursuing a minimal irrigation cover crop program makes sense from what I know thus far, and I will try to add irrigation as possible to support soil building cover crop. My hope is that soil building will start holding more rainfall and perhaps eventually reduce the amount of irrigation needed. What I see on the site is the north-facing hills are much more heavily treed. They even have some moss growing on them. The south, east, and west-facing hills have a Ponderosa-Bunchgrass climax community growing at a much lower density on the trees and even with bare soil visible. So it seems clear to me that the shade is good for the plants. More shade means less water is cooked off of the soil and more things grow. And so that seems like trees could be a good addition, like silvopasture alleys to graze animals and cut hay in between rows of trees to shade the soil. But then trees drink a lot of water, so would this be counterproductive? Now cooling down the whole little valley with some trees would be great. Plus, there's a great resources for firewood and poles and fodder and mulch. So trees are awesome. And how do I understand how to balance what they contribute with the water they will consume? Thank you. Okay, so just to kind of fill this out, and Ruben, if you can, feel free to put in a link so that way folks can connect with your site, because it's always easier when we have visuals. But generally in arid or semi-arid environments, usually on the northern side of hills, we tend to see more established ecology. So we tend to see more microorganisms, we tend to see macroorganisms, both insect, mammal, bird, avian, salamanders, reptiles, you name it. We tend to see more life. And because of that, we also see climax ecology in terms of whatever the biome blueprint is, tends to build up on that side. Because you're in a place that has is arid, semi-arid, gets very hot summers, hotter and hotter every single year, and because you tend to get north to south winds and a lot from the south during the winter, you tend to get some bearing that's happening and some wind erosion that's happening on the western side. So generally in your site, and I think we've talked about this before, anywhere that we can start to establish trees, be they pioneer, which I would start with, I would take a look at the pioneer deciduous on your site and would start to work with that. I think we've talked about this before, especially around the creek, using some of the riparian deciduous, so your alders, your willows, your red oaks, or dogwood, but also taking in any cracks, crevices, any place where there is indentation. So any place where it's rough and loose, this idea that a swale is rough and loose, the idea that mulch is rough and loose. When we talk about earthworks from a first principles perspective, we're really talking about creating something rough and loose, so that way it has the ability to capture water and also increase the amount of surface area. So the name of your game is really, where can you start to enact some of these trees with as much support as possible? And I think that's where, again, this is all about time and money investment to offset what the result will be. And this is I'm answering a double question here, because I'm answering your question and then Shawani's question a little bit further down. There's few things that I've seen work better to support trees than hugelkultur in arid environments. Because hugelkultur is inherently a decomposing mass, it increases its water holding capacity, and it also can hold onto water like a sponge, to the point to where it can become this secondary water source for vegetation, be they trees or shrubs or grasses. I think the other thing I would think about, Ruben, is, and I would start off with a test plot. I think we've talked about nucleated design before. I would start off with a test plot of starting to work with some aerated compost extracts. Now, again, the difference between aerated compost extract and aerated compost tea and aerated compost teas and non-aerated compost tea is that what we're doing is we're taking non-treated water. This means non-chlorinated, non-chlorimated. So it can't have any biocide within it, which a lot of urban sites have because of the water treatment plants that are done for municipalities. We're taking that water and then we're taking good compost. So we're taking compost that is not necessarily derived from just kitchen scraps. It's created with a 40-40-20 in terms of browns, greens, and nitrogen. And it's created at volume, so greater than 1 meter cubed, if not larger, using either the Berkeley compost method or working with Elaine's method or working with the Johnson-Su bioreactor. All of these are great ways to go about making compost. And then we're taking that compost after we know it's been decomposed well and it's been created well. We're putting it into a stiff bag. So this is a net bag that has some rigidity to it. Stainless steel is better. Joe Tobias of Root Shoot just got, I think, 500 units created. So that way we finally have a source of compost, aerated compost brewing bags in Canada. So if you reach out to her at Root Shoot, she's got them for sale. I think the poly bags are 40 and the stainless steel are 60. It's one of those things you buy once, go for stainless steel. And basically you put it into that volume of water. I like using an IBC tote. Again, using IBC totes is useful because they're used for liquid the world over. Also, if we use them for organic liquids, we know that there's not going to be any chemical compound in it. And then generally what I'm using is I'm using an Eco Plus 5 pump. You can use the 3, but it just means you can never scale up. So Eco Plus 3 is a great one to use. And then basically you're blowing air into this volume of water to extract all of the different microorganisms from the compost. So when I'm talking about aerated compost extracts, that's what I'm talking about. If we're just focusing on a stirring process, it's okay. It just doesn't have that same amount of what we would visually see as a rolling boil. Again, there's no heat here because the pump is pumping air, not water, but it looks like a rolling boil because it's basically pummeling that bag and dropping all those microorganisms into solution. So that's what we would call an aerated compost extract. And usually we'll run the pump for, can be as low as 30 minutes and up to 2 hours. And generally we need to apply that within, a couple of hours is useful. Now, the reason why I say that, Ruben, is that could be one of the many flywheels you're going to restart on that very barren landscape. And so application of that could look as simple as a backpack sprayer that's never been used for anything else before, or backpack sprayer that's being used from forestry, because forestry only puts water into their backpack sprayers. But I wouldn't get a second hand from agricultural outfit. And then you can go all the way up to sprayers that are pull behinds off PTOs of tractors and whatnot. There is actually a kind of middle case use from Princess Auto or Lord Code, where they've got a sprayer that you can pull behind an ATV, and you could do an acre in probably an hour and a half. Not too bad there. So if you wanted to start to practice that along with, I'm pretty sure I read that your father-in-law has a seed drill. And so if you were looking at doing some test plots with compost extract, then with cover crop, I think what you're going to find is you're going to find a good synergy there. And then in terms of trees, as much as possible, I would try to establish 1 or 2 belts along your land there. And they could be, this is where when we get into tree systems, it really depends on what you want to do and what you're going to support. If you were going to support a row of trees with irrigation, I would then start to go into a mini agroforestry concept where you've got established trees for quick growing pioneer species that are going to buffet wind, that are going to create a little bit of niche behind them because we're always looking for those microclimates. And then I would probably move down into some support species that are also fruit bearing. I think in a place like yours, exploring Elaeagnus multiflora and Elaeagnus umbellata, the gumi and the akigumi, they're nitrogen fixing, so they meet the need of supporting whatever species you have there. Two, they create a berry that has higher lycopene than tomato, and lycopene is a sure shot for prostate cancer. And in all the trials, pardon me, not trials, in all of the situations I saw during the last two heat domes in British Columbia, they were the only berry that didn't boil on the bush. And I think that would be really important for a site like you if you are going to think about first restarting the ecological processes, and then second, starting to have a little bit of um, product that's coming off the site. I would work with something that's particularly hardy like that. They require a fair bit of water, and that's why I'm saying if you're going to irrigate that tree row, that could be a very useful first step in developing that. Again, if it were if I had the time, money, and energy and trees, I would probably try to do as much hugelkultur as I could along that row. Just going to allow you to be able to remove that irrigation earlier, because basically the trees will find the hugelkultur pretty much within year 2 or 3, which means you could bring them off irrigation. Then they'll be on the hugelkultur, and then eventually they'll find subsurface water and they'll find their own way. So it's kind of, you're thinking about these 3 stages in tree growth. That first year or two, up to 4, you're going to need to supplement irrigate. And then after that, you need to find a way. The Galliano food forest, called the pilot food forest on my website, is a great example. They forgot to water the first season, and the hugelkultur saved all the trees. And so in a place like the West Coast that you're familiar with, 4 months without rain, that's an impressive feat that I haven't really seen. I haven't seen paralleled yet with something else yet. There are these things called tree wells, and basically they look like little skirts, and you fill them with water and they slowly drip water down, which might be useful. Other thing, if you want to go lower tech, lower effort than some of the things I've mentioned, is rock mulch has been used in a number of arid situations and has been proven in arid situations, one of them being the Albaida project in Saudi Arabia by Neil Spackman. Um, and I've done a ton on the West Coast where we grab larger rocks, and basically that temperature differential and the dew point in the morning will condense around the rocks water, and that water will help to support a tree. Is it a lot? No. But is it something? Yeah. So I would say if you can work with any of those, or if you're working on slopes, you can work on swale, or you can work with berm. The problem with swale and berms in your environment is you have such free draining, low organic matter soil. The swales won't do much. Like they'll hold a little bit of water, but if you, as we in the Okanagan, we get these things called the June soons. We get these big rains in June and in the fall. And so you're going to fill that up. It's going to soak in, and then what? So I just don't know if that's going to be as useful as actually having buried material that's going to decompose. Again, if you're working with hugelkulturs, this goes for anybody. Hugelkulturs and swales do not mix. They are not to be mixed. They're never to be bred together to create the hugel swale or the the swega culture. The reason for that is hugelkulturs are terrestrial environments, and we cannot have them be inundated with water, or else they go anaerobic and they start to drop their populations. So in that case, hugelkulturs need to be off contour to be of any value. And then, as usual, mulch. I think in your situation, finding and connecting with anybody who's producing large scale mulch. Southeast of you is the Midway mill, and they do both a small, a medium, and a large grade wood chip, and they also do hog fuel at a cheaper rate. If you can find somebody closer who's going to be able to drop off a dump truck and pup of mulch or anything you can find, fantastic. For everybody who's listening, in terms of mulching, again, you can mulch deep. You can mulch 3, 6 inches. You can mulch up to 10 centimeters. But again, you want to keep it away from the trunk of the tree. Any mulch against the trunk of the tree is going to be a vector for disease, rot, insect, things of that nature. So you really want to keep aware about that. So in terms of how would I balance what they contribute with the water they will consume, trees are one of the few flywheels on your site that could help you bring back an entire ecology. They could help you plant productive species underneath their shade, which they will need. And I would strive in any way, shape, or form to bring them back. So if and when you understand what the due diligence is about what the site is willing to expend for trees, I would look into it. And also the climate adaptation grants, I believe, are out in February. You'll have to check that, but they're anywhere from 50% to 75% of an installation. So I would absolutely take advantage of those dollars. Just going to check my notes here. I was kind of going off yeah. The other thing I wanted to say is that, and sometimes this gets misconstrued in YouTube videos and popularizations of permaculture and other types of processes. There is no free lunch. Everything takes energy, everything dissipates energy, and entropy is always working on everything. So there's no free lunch, but nature's as close as you can get. So when we work with these ecological cycles, when you find the divots that are rough and loose, the places where water can be held, you build up the organic matter, you give support to any sort of ecology you're developing, be it a cover crop, be it a shrub layer, forb layer, small tree, large tree, those flywheels will take off on themselves. And that's really where I think Mollison figured it out. We're assemblers. We assemble different elements that already have their pre-existing and pre-established relationships, and then they do their relating. We do very little in the conversation. The big conversation is to be able to read and sit with the landscape and to observe it deeply. So that way, when we read the book of nature, we read it correctly. And when we read it wrong, not if, we open it up again, hopefully with a bit more humility and humble eyes to be able to see what we're looking at. How's that sound for an answer, sir? Any follow-up questions or conversations there?
That sounds real good. Yeah, I was talking with my dad about hugelkultur, and there's an astonishing amount of fallen trees really on the landscape that we could harvest from all the hillsides and fields and whatnot. The 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 riparian ecosystem is really just close to the creek. Like it's within feet of the creek, with the exception of one bottom corner of the field that the poplars are creeping in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious as to why that's happening, but I'd really like to just let the poplars go as far as they want to
Yeah.
into that field to see what's going on down there, and then maybe, can start replacing with other things or something. But it's as soon as you get off the creek, it just switches immediately to Ponderosa, and
Yeah.
there is no like nursemaid deciduous. Like you go up in the hills and there's like Douglas fir seedlings and there's Ponderosa seedlings, and there's no like the only deciduous there is shrubs. It's the Saskatoon berry
Right.
and there's a wax currant that's leafing out right now, that's quite a bit smaller. So yeah, so I'm trying to think about moving into those fields with the pasture. Um, and so I'm thinking about like, yeah, fodder trees in belts. And there are all these benches that the creek has cut that just seem like a natural area we can just trench
Mm-hmm.
with the tractor and fill with logs and pull the soil back over top,
Yeah.
and then start trying to figure out how to get some irrigation on that spot.
Yeah.
It is a sprawling site. There's 25 acres potentially that could be irrigated.
Yeah.
And so just the labor of moving pipes and starting the pump and all that kind of stuff is something that I am trying to figure out how to automate or do with less labor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even getting it on hugelkultur and stuff. So there's kind of a lot of parts up in the air there. I don't know anything about the aerated compost extracts, so that's something I will look into.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
A couple things
yeah.
there that you're speaking about. So part of my want and desire to see you start to plant out the riparian area is that once you have two ecologies and they come up together, you get what's called an ecotone. So that,
Mhm.
and an ecotone is a riparian area. So that
Right.
riparian area is going to be as much as the influence of the water on land. The
Mhm.
more you plant that out, the more that influence is going to creep further inland.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah.
start to talk about some of the pioneer shrubs as being wax currant and Saskatoon, that to me then suggests let's start taking a look at some of those Saskatoons and some of those other types of ribes closer to the riparian area, and maybe turning some of that ecotone into a productive area, because Saskatoons aren't
Mhm.
good unless they're strongly watered.
Right.
There's no
Yeah.
value to them whatsoever. They're just bullets, you
Yeah.
just chew them
Yeah.
and there's fiber. But when they're watered, they're exceptional. Like one of the
Mhm.
things we did just a few valleys over is I, we also teach a family food security course. And so one of the portions of that course is all about wild harvesting and looking for opportunities for wild harvest. And I always go to the ditches first because the ditches are water collection devices. They're swales.
Mhm.
And so I found 7 to 20 different spots where I could go grab my little berry harvester and then get all of our I used to say all of our Saskatoons, but it was really all of our berries for a year for a family of four in about 8 to 9 hours and
Uh-huh.
still leave 80, 90% for wildlife and the bears and all the rest of it. So
Hmm.
if we could move, or if you could start to work with some of those Saskatoons or cultivated varieties into the field where the poplars are, that to me, like those types of observations are where I might start to work with.
Hmm.
And then have some of your longer shots, some of your Hail Marys further afield that you do as much as you can to support. But again, start small, see what it looks like first and foremost, and then see how that experiment plays out.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I've been wondering about little micro irrigation systems like that, just a little independent solar pump or something like that, so that even things that I could use at the upper edges of the riparian areas, to just like, there's the creek, here's a solar panel, boom, there's water on a little row of bushes or something like
Mhm.
that. Um, just to try to get the creek is really Dad calls it a perched water table. So like that
Okay.
you can dig a hole right beside the creek and there's no water in it. Like it's
Yeah.
a little bacteria lined trench.
Mhm.
So but then it breaks out in this poplar area. So that's why I'm so interested in that, is that it no longer is perched there. So
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. Once you start to get a little bit of riparian deciduous pioneers that start in, they move
hmm.
it further inland.
Uh-huh.
So if it is bacterially perched, or if it's years of flow, like
Yeah.
millennia of flow, and
Yeah.
that's just created some compacted soil, or it's found its settle point in that area. What'll end up happening is you'll get those types of pioneers, and they will push that area further. It's what always happens. And then there's
Hmm.
that flow of the river in terms of the cut and the deposition, which will then change those little ecologies to create these little eddies and these little areas that can increase the amount of
Hmm.
vegetation. But yeah, you could probably work with a direct DC pump off of a solar panel to do a little micro conversation.
Hmm.
Depending on your Yeah, it just depends on how far in you are and what's the battery.
Yeah.
Generally, they need a source of power that they produce over a period of time that then they expend to move that water.
Right. Right.
Um, because it takes a heck of a lot of power to move water. It's one of the reasons
Hmm.
why permaculture and originally P.A. Yeomans talked about that water high in the landscape is the best battery you can have.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
there's a fair amount of value in that conversation, similar to the conversation we had about that little draw and
Hmm.
what it might take or look like to get water in there.
Hmm.
Um, Only because there might be some opportunity, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's worth an experiment. I wouldn't put a huge amount of faith into it to move it very far, but
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
like extend the riparian a little bit and to have a little bit of cultivatable areas that might have some support from the creek. Yeah,
Hmm.
I would say it's worth it.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I opened up like 10 tabs to research here. So,
Yeah, I had students when I was teaching live call me the credible Hulk because I was never one to say, oh, I saw this thing this one time and I guess it might work. It was because so much of permaculture was that when I began, it was a lot of not just anecdotal evidence, but a lot of people talking, parroting what they'd seen before, as opposed to actually taking a look at systems and conversations. So I'm resistant to ever talk about something that I don't feel is 100%. Or if I do, then I'm always sourcing it. So I hear you. that's that's par for the course. An answer to produce 10 tabs. I like that. Go Beans. Thanks, sir. Great. Shawani as well. And just for everybody else, love to get back in the habit of putting in our links to our presentations. So if we could put the link to the presentation there, Shawani, I would appreciate it because it just
Yeah.
helps
Yeah.
everybody learn. Okay, so question, after understanding about planting trees on ridges and valleys, off and off, on and off contour to harvest water and protect soil from further erosion, humus building, what is required for my sandy, highly erodible soils as multi-storied plantings of trees, shrubs, and ground cover? Present, I've been trying to water existing coconut palms, areca nut palms, which are under 600 in number. I've been trying to water them with a hose and digging channels, pumping out water from the river nearby. There are new saplings of coconut palms in some areas, and I'm trying to save them by watering and mulching them with dry coconut palm leaves. Mango, sapote, jackfruit, cashew, approximately 300 number, and a few of the Garcinia indica, Phyllanthus, black Ambleca, banana, cashew. I'm unable to water them as there's less manpower and it's difficult to work in the sun climate. Okay, so to actually understand from theoretical to practical, I'm going to visit my land in Maharashtra and Haryana, current living state. Can you please, what else could be done to save or revive the existing trees? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about a few things here, just from a principles perspective, because again, I really want folks to get the sense of the principle and then how to apply it in your specific situation. And part of that is to start with any person who has entered into a long, thoughtful, and protracted, primarily observational relationship with a piece of land is by far the better choice to make decisions about a piece of land. We're, 4, 5, 6,000 kilometers away from each other, probably more. So while I can speak about first principles and I can speak to some of the projects that I've helped to advise in India, I can't speak about your specific site because I'm not there. So I just wanted to start with that, because if we start on first principles, we can go a fair way. But if I say something about boomerang swales or hugelkultur or anything that you go, I don't know if that'll work in my site, you're probably right. Like I would always give it a try and make sure I applied appropriately. This happened to me a couple of years ago. We had a bloom of grasshoppers after a very dry winter and dry spring. And usually the wet spring creates a type of fungus that wipes out the grasshoppers' numbers. So that way, when it gets hot and there's pressure on the population, they don't metamorph into locusts. They metamorphed into locusts and they raised my site. Like you name the plant, they destroyed it. So in that situation, I was willing to reach out to any idea under the sun and try it, but I had to try it completely. And some of those ideas I did half-heartedly, and I really couldn't lean on them as an idea. So the big principles I want you to take away from that is read your landscape well, be in relationship with your landscape, really sink into it. And then there is something to try it and try it well. In terms of the design and the site, I just wanted to go over this with folks a bit because not everyone's going to have this conversation about the site that we did. So this is a great base map that Shawani put together. She also put together a great model out of cardboard, which I think is phenomenal. And what we talked about is we talked about working with something called keyline design. So keyline design was created by P.A. Yeomans in the 1940s after he had a massive fire come through one of his farms, killed family members, destroyed homes. And basically, he took all of his previous experience in being a land surveyor, in being a miner, and working with the Chinese, who were quite good at the time seeing where the water would hold in the landscape, which he ended up calling the key point of the valley, which is where land goes from convex to concave. It's the point in the valley where if water is in, where if earth is in solution, so sand, silt, and clay, the violence of the raindrop breaks apart the sand, silt, and clay from the soil bed, comes into solution, comes over that apex, that convex point, and then slows down. Then sand, silt, and clay can, in order, settle out. And so there could be an opportunity there for water and water holding in terms of clay being held in that landscape. And because this is the great thing about reading a landscape well, you get to leverage thousands, if not tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years of geology, because that process has been working all the way along to when we come to the point of being able to read the landscape appropriately. So there's these interesting points in the landscape. If you're looking at this, I'm going to zoom in here. There's these interesting points in the landscape here where we've got some high points. So we've got 98, 93, 95, 95. We have a 90 over here. We have a valley in the center. And we have these convex, when the contour lines are close together, that's steep. When the contour lines are far apart, it's shallow. So there's these really interesting spots here in the landscape where we go from convex to concave, where I would be very conscientious, as we were talking about before, Shwani and I, about taking a look and seeing if we can find clay there. The reason for that is any water held higher in this landscape could be used for flood irrigation, or with a little bit of input of either a pump or a solar pump could potentially be used with water recirculation to actually filter out and develop these areas. Second thing is in keyline design, we talk about revegetating the water courses immediately, and they kind of become their own water course areas. So basically, if we have little waterways that come through here, we really want to make sure that these waterways are vegetated and vegetated well. And then similarly, we want to take a look at these. We want to take a look at these areas and see if we can't vegetate any of these drainages. Again, the drainages are our watershed. We want to protect our watershed. So these definitely want to be revegetated. And then when we get into our ridges, so this is a ridge, this is a valley and a valley, so this becomes a ridge. One of the things that PA Yeomans gave us was this idea of land unit. And land units, you basically take the valleys and the ridges. And the way he did it is he would take blue lines. Oh, that's interesting. Why isn't that? Oh, it is drawing. It's just very light. He would take valleys and ridges. I'll change to a lighter color. He would take valleys and ridges. So I don't want to be on that. I want to be on this. He would take valleys and ridges. So valleys and valleys and valleys. This is a rough approximation here. Nobody take this for truth. And then he would take ridges, which he would do in red. And that's too dark. He would take ridges that he would do in red, and this kind of comes out here and comes over here. This comes all the way here, and then also comes this way. And then we've got a ridge that comes down here to here. And then in between the red and the blue, we also have one here. I'm going to leave that side for now. In between the red and the blue, he would call these land units. So basically, he would think of these accurately like a roof. So this would be the ridge of the roof. This would be the gutter. And basically, he would calculate the water that was coming off of this, and he would try to keep all of these land units separate. So he would call them L1. That was terrible. L2. This would be L3. This would be L4, L5, L6, L7, L8, and L9. And the reason why this was such a revolutionary way of doing this, oh, there'd also be one on this side too. So 10 on the southern side of the main drainage of the property, is that usually, not always, but usually these would also be self-similar microclimates. So these areas might start dry and then go wet at the bottom, but generally you would see this same sort of pattern across a landscape. And so you could design this landscape over these different roof structures. And so for Ruben or anybody else, it's great because you can take this area and you can know exactly how much water falls here and start to get a sense of what you might want to try there. So I'm going to remove the land units and come back to this idea of keyline design. One of the things we would do in keyline design is approach it from keyline geometry. And so keyline geometry basically says that if we do any cultivation, we're going to start high in the valley and we're going to go low on the ridge. And what that means is if we have high in the valley, so if this is the contour that we're looking at designing off of, so this is the contour as it exists, we're going to try and find a pattern that runs along that contour that starts high in the valley and then crosses over into the ridge. So something like this, where we kind of cross over, and similarly comes low and cross over like this. And if we run this, I'm not saying this is the right one, but this is the idea. If we run this pattern upwards, what you'll see is that on the ridge, this line starts high. So this starts on what looks like 98, 97, then crosses 96, 95, 94. So what would happen is if we planted trees on that contour, we talked about this last time.
Yeah.
If we plant trees on that contour, we end up with a pipe drain that basically allows water to flow towards the ridge. And this is the genius of keyline. So back to the question, I just wanted to catch everybody up here because we got some new folks here. Back to the question, and a whole lot of squiggles, is what else could we do to save or revive existing trees? So there's a couple of things we can do in terms of elements that we can't water. So first we have the boomerang swale or the smiley face swale. And that basically allows us to have a tree on a slope. And then what we do is we create a little berm below it, but it has an overflow that ensures that the crown of the tree, which is where the roots become the trunk, never gets inundated with water. And that just allows for a little bit more water to be held near the tree. Doesn't necessarily irrigate the tree. It just in rain events, you get a little bit more water there. Now, because your site, Shawani, from your climate survey, looks like it has pretty lengthy drought period, I would, instead of doing this, I'd probably think about doing an off-contour hugelkultur just below. That if we looked at it from straight on, and if this is the slope, instead of being perfectly on contour, it would be slightly off contour. Again, we don't want it to become aquatic. Again, we talked about aerated compost extracts and teas just to increase the water holding capacity by increasing the organic matter, and then focusing on high producing trees or those close to zone 0-1, so that way you can work upon them well and then move further in. You're already doing some great things with mulching, which is great. I would say that if you can increase your mulching and kind of extend the skirt of it, that would be useful. So if you can extend probably out to here and out to here. And again, you're doing this great. You're keeping away from the crown, which is excellent. And you've got a little bit of a pit around that. That's excellent. If this is a slope, if you can, try and make that pit a little larger on the downhill side. So building it up and kind of getting a deeper reservoir. Or again, as we talked about, hugelkultur can be a great value in that. And then application of compost extracts and teas, pull away the mulch, apply around that area. You can also do it low tech. So when I was in Cuba, we made compost extract as well as a manure extract just by allowing and frothing the water. So we had in Africa, they're called djembes. It's exactly what this looks like, actually. So it's a little hoe. And basically, we just agitated the water dramatically. And it was, we sung songs and we did it for about an hour or as long as our arms could take. And then we swapped off. But then what we did is we took a bucket and then I think we even took some banana fronds and we basically were just spreading that solution all around the base of the trees and then putting the mulch back on. So what you're doing is you're inoculating the soil with microorganisms, you're inoculating with bacteria, fungi, microarthropods, nematodes, and protozoa. And basically those organisms then start to interact with the soil, helping to mine the different elements that the tree needs. So it actually increases the potential fertility of the area for the tree. A lot of people think it's material or fertility itself you add to the area, but aerated compost extracts and teas are actually creating the workers, if you will, that will go off and mine the different minerals and then make relationships with the tree, because the tree puts out exudates. It takes in carbon dioxide, it takes in solar energy, it cleaves the CO2, the carbon it uses to build up its body, it respires the oxygen, and then it exudates, it puts out the carbon in these small and long chain carbon chains through its roots, attracting the bacteria and the fungi, which in turn attract the microarthropods, the nematodes, and the protozoa, and that whole living soil food web. When we're taking a look at barren ground like this, generally that living soil food web is going to be quite low in terms of its total numbers. So anything you can do to increase that amount of population, I think would be useful. So I would say you're on the right track. You're doing great things already. Bravo. Hats off to you. I would probably put a bit more mulch on. I would make a larger skirt and maybe a little bit deeper. And then as much as possible with the pits or with the swales, if you can, build them a little bit larger. And again, test them to see if they fill up with water, that this crown isn't inundated with water. Or if there are some stunning specimen trees that are jackfruit, for example, there's some trees that just overproduce and you want to support. I was talking with Leon about this as well. You may want to support those trees individually with, a higher grade, something like hugelkultur. Generally, when I look at your land, it's from the photos from before, it's generally quite flat and there's not as much undulation as I'd like to see. It's not as rough and loose as I would like to see. So any of these stops for the water during the monsoonal season and some of the smaller rains you get in the non-monsoon season would be great. And then any kind of pioneer ground cover. So if you can find some great nitrogen fixing plants that are already pre-existing on site, or if you can get seed for it, really starting to plant around these areas. Because what will happen is once you make all these implementations, there'll be more water available to that area around the tree. And similar to Ruben's question, they become little oases. They become little coral reefs. They become the first kind of implementation. And then around them, you can start to have more and more potential. So I think you've done a great job. I would do more of it if possible. And like looking at this slope, I don't know if this photo was taken in perfect perspective, but it's pretty easy to take a hoe or a djembe, make a little indentation on the bottom there, develop a little bit of a boomerang swale or an upside down or a smiley face, because that's quick and easy. And what I might do is start to think about sort of a treatment protocol on site. So as you move further and further and further away from the center of human initiative, the zone 0, the zone 1, I may move further and further out into supportive earthworks that are potentially more work up front, but because you're not going to be out there all that much, it would support the tree long term. So that might mean hugelkultur is further away from the site. Things like swales and mulch closer to the site. Mulch should be all over the site, but I think all of that would be a good way to go about, because you have so many trees, because you're working at the like 600, 300, 900 conversation. And then the other thing I'll say is, because you have a big site, and I think you've shown a lot of enthusiasm, really focus on the areas and the elements around that zone 0, zone 1 where you're at. Because what'll happen is, we try to do everything on a site all at once, we will fail just automatically. I've made the mistake multiple times. I've had to be taught that mistake, that lesson more than once. And what I've learned and have learned to argue against and for against and for clients. I'm arguing for them, but I'm arguing against what their first impulse is. A lot of clients want to spread out over the landscape, and what's more useful is to really stay closer to where you come routinely, build up the systems, really test them, and then slowly move out in areas where you can manage. Because what will happen is, if you take on too much, there is a negative feedback loop of failure that can really affect us emotionally. It can affect our motivation to do more. It can affect our ability to feel like we can execute well. And one of the reasons why, when I work with clients, I talk about one of my mentors and friends' adage of "let's make farming boring again," because permaculture is kind of like the crow. We're always looking for the new shiny thing, and we're always excited about the new thing. But it's really about, and this is why values-based decision-making is so important, it's really about saying, okay, what do I want the site to be? And what's the one thing I should do this year to get it there? And then take stock of that experiment, go, great, all of the boomerang swales, we're seeing an improvement in the trees because we've documented them, we've taken their height, we've taken photos of the coloration of their leaves, and they're all looking better, or they're producing more. Those are both metrics we can use. So we like these implements. The implements we did over here, we didn't see the same result. I think we're going to switch everything over to boomerang swales, compost, aerated compost extract and teas, and some mulching. So also keep track of what you're doing. It's easy to go out and try to put out every fire you see, but really focus on a few areas and a few conversations and a few implementations. But I think you're on the right track. You're doing great work. Any follow-up questions or any thoughts about that, Shawani?
No, actually, I have got a real real insight into this. I've got a. I just want to say thank you, because I really understand what to do and what I'm doing and what more can be done in the right direction. And I will start small and I will focus on the few trees, and then I will see and right and follow the steps what you have told.
Okay.
And maybe then I have some questions. Right now, I
Yeah,
don't have
always.
any.
Always. And there was a site I worked on in Kenya, and we thought at the beginning we knew exactly what we were supposed to be doing. And the very first rain that happened, we noticed that, as roads do, because not all roads are crowned, even if they're dirt roads, the ruts in the road were channelizing water. Channelization means when water picks up speed and starts to incise the water deeper and deeper. Same thing that's happening in the creek for Reuben and the world over. This is the great thing about water. Once you understand how it works the same the world over. And what's so interesting about that site is that when we saw that, and because it's Kenya, we could install a speed bump that would take all the water from the road, which was taking roughly about 40 or 50 acres, 25, 20 hectares, and funneling it down this road and bring it directly into our site. And so it changed the whole conversation because we were observing of the site and we were watching where the water was moving and how we could potentially pick up that water and put that water into productive use. That site is now 11 years old, which is insane. And they've made a lot of little changes. They've moved buildings. They moved the entire shower house because it was a better spot for another element. So we just have to be willing to work with a lot of mobile infrastructure in the first couple of years. It's one of the reasons why I do not recommend bearing irrigation in year one. I recommend laying it out and seeing if it's a good place for it. But we have time on our side. It's one of the things that we forget. We can use time to our advantage and really just see what we're looking at and see where the flow is going, and then operating it that way, operating underneath that approach of, let's do a small thing, let's make sure we document it well, and then let's see. We can save a lot of problems and a lot of cash. I remember a site that had installed irrigation on the behest of an irrigation specialist who was working in commercial design, but had never worked in food production. And it couldn't have been more problematic because they were operating off of different belief system, and it just wasn't compatible with the site. So yeah, I'm grateful to hear that. Grateful to hear that that's landing well. We have a few minutes left. Does anybody have a follow-up clarification question about either of those two, or something else, or something to do with the announcements, or anything else under the sun? Okay. As usual, what are folks taking away from the call today? What felt important to hear, or any aha moments or confirmation moments, or yeah, what are folks taking away? Feel free to unmute or put yourself in the chat.
I mean, for me, today I've got the vision after the 3 months, and it seems after today's session, that it seems that I can go and work and actually observe and see what can be done, and maybe make a few more changes. Like I did some reviving with respect to revival of the plants, and then maybe now in a better and a more productive way after today's session.
Awesome.
So,
Thanks, Shivani.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
it's grateful. Thank you, Javan.
Hey, Javan.
Nicholas, good to see you.
Likewise, I'll take this opportunity to officially meet all of you guys, since I haven't been able to be in any of these conversations. Hopefully, I'll be able to make it at least to two more. So I guess following up on your question and the comments by Shivani, I guess one of the recurring themes of all of the conversations today, and even taking back to that conversation you had on Sustainable World Radio, the importance of patience. That what you call it, the new shiny objectitis. Well,
Yeah.
you said
Shiny
it.
thinginitis. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, it's so easy to let the enthusiasm be wrapped up in the new project rather than on the patience and deliberateness of the actions. So I guess the advice you were giving both to Ruben and to Shivani, both of them have that element in common. Start with the easiest, most likely to be successful events, and then build up from the feedback that gives you. So hopefully we'll learn the lesson.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicholas. Appreciate it. When working with clients, one of the things I'll work with them if they're food focused clients is we'll try to grow all their own mint tea for a year. And it's a really simple plant. It's very advantageous. It'll take over the whole garden. So you plant in pots. That's a little tip. But usually by year one, they have the ability to grow all of their own mint. And it's those small successes that really help them to go, oh, I can do this. And then you move on to another plant they love, or you move on to a production. So I love the taste of black garlic. This is garlic that goes through what's called the Maillard process, and it does a slow ferment, and it also does a chemical change. And it's this beautiful umami flavor that's just overflowing. It's just incredible. And it's the easiest thing to do. You take a rice cooker, you take a bunch of heads of garlic, you stick it in there, you put it on warm, not cooked, and you forget about it for a month. And then you just check it to see if it's, the soft type of black garlic, which most people like, but the way that we cook in our house, we like it so that way it's hard, and we could either take it out and put it in the dehydrator, or we could just leave it in there and then we pulverize it and then we use it as a powder. But that whole idea is really about, work with what wants to work with you, work with the low hanging fruit, so to speak. And sometimes that's literal, and then have patience. So I appreciate that. Thanks very much, Nicholas. Ruben.
Yeah, I'm really feeling that patience piece. I think maybe because of the aridity of the site, just thinking about this succession of sort of like support generations. You plant a thing that supports a thing that then supports the thing you actually want, and just that time scale feels very stretched because of the low amount of water. So just trying to get into that kind of mindset.
Yeah, totally. And some of the anchoring pieces there are 1% of organic matter increase on an acre holds 20,000 gallons. So if you focus on that idea of how can I increase the organic matter instead of how can I make a tree, we used to joke when we were teaching soil science is that healthy plants are the byproduct of great soil, and what we're always doing is developing great soil. So part of that at scale means aerated compost extract is a scaled approach. Cover crops, it's a scaled approach. When we get to things like biochar is a small scale approach. We can't really scale that out at scale. And so just being conscientious about what you're using where, but biochar works great in the annual garden or the kitchen garden that's around the house. So yeah, it's just using the right tool for the right perspective and job. So yeah, appreciate that. Awesome. Sky or JRK, do either of you guys want to chime in what you're taking away from the call today? What was valuable? Okay. Awesome, folks. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for being here today. Really looking forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks. As usual, any questions, conversations, problems, anything at all, feel free to reach out. If you're having real problems kind of getting into the design conversation, or it feels too much, too little, etc., feel free to reach out. Happy to jump on a Zoom call. Javan at allpointsdesign.ca if you want to get right to me, because I'm only on Canvas when I'm marking, which is usually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So if you want to get to me a little quicker. Also, if you want to have a Zoom with me, feel free to tell me your time zone right away. I'm in like the 4th email with somebody from our class trying to find a good time. So if you can tell me your time zone, if you want to have a Zoom call, then I can jump into it a little quicker. Sky, today for me, the failure motivation correlation was the most important lesson. Thank you. Great piece to add in. Love that. Yeah, huge. Yeah, when I started my first company, Permaculture BC, one of the things that I heard most from students as I was teaching short and long courses was, you gave me permission to fail. You gave me permission to go out and try something. And so the motto of that company before it became a community asset was Malor Defecere, which is fail better. Because we failed so horribly for so long that with a little bit of intent, we can fail a little better, and we can kind of embrace it. We can embrace going, oh, great. I know I'm going to kill 20, 30, 70% of the plants here. If you start stratifying seeds and you live in temperate climates and you start working in nurseries, you kill an awful lot of plants in a short amount of time. So just be kind with yourselves, be kind with your sites, and go with it as much joy and fun and compassion as you can, because when you work with nature, she works with you in tenfold. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Really looking forward to it, and take care.
Yeah. Thank you,
Bye-bye,
Javan.
everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye.